things a bit and follow the EU legislation regarding the transportation of animals, including pregnant animals. So I look forward to hearing the plans to ensure that Northern Ireland are able to align with the rest of the United Kingdom, and what we discuss here can be something we can all grasp. To conclude, Mr. Chairman, the RSPCA have proven to go above and beyond, and last year the RSPCA convicted 447 defendants, including 2 youth offenders, and the prosecution rate was 91.7%. Wow, isn't that good? That gives you an idea. When they take a case on, they want to win it. And if they can do that well, then it's something that was doing. That's even higher than in 2022, or indeed even higher again in 2021. The work that they undertake is incredible, and we are so grateful for all of their work. So I look to the Minister today to answer how we can support these societies and these charities further, as we are truly in debt to their fantastic efforts. Mr. Chairman, thank you so much.
If members want to be called in this debate, it needs a bob. Becky Giggins.
Thank you, Mr. Twigg. And may I say it's a pleasure to serve under your chairship on what is my very first time contributing in a Westminster Hall debate. I want to pay tribute also to the member for Newport West and Isloyn for securing such a timely debate and speaking so well about some of the achievements of the RSPCA over its 200 years, and indeed setting out some of the challenges that it currently faces. I want to focus my comments this morning on the current issues surrounding the microchipping of dogs and what more can be done to ensure that the system is fit for purpose and properly enforced. I should declare an interest from the start. As a proud owner of a rescue Staffordshire Bull Terrier, animal and indeed dog welfare is very, very close to my heart. Last week, in preparation for today's debate, I visited the Almost Home Dog Rescue near Mould in my constituency of Clwyd East. The team at Almost Home do a fantastic job, and they are a credit to our community. But they were clear that there is a huge UK-wide problem. In their words, the pounds are full, the rescue centres are full, and hundreds of puppies and healthy young dogs are being put to sleep on a weekly basis. It is their experience on the front line, as it were, that the situation is becoming a crisis, and that Lucy's Law, which effectively makes it illegal for third-party and commercial traders to sell puppies and kittens, is not working as it should. After 40 years in rescue, they have never known a pressure like this before. Now, I welcome the fact that I stood on a manifesto that committed to ending puppy smuggling and farming, and I welcome any update from the Minister today on that issue. I also welcome the fact that the Welsh Labour Manifesto committed to the UK and Welsh Government working together on animal welfare issues, including on microchipping. In terms of my background for today, I want to thank the Dogs Trust for meeting with me and providing a briefing around the importance of microchipping. I think everyone here will recognise the benefits of microchipping pets and dogs in particular. When working effectively, microchipping allows people to rapidly identify a stray or lost dog and return it to its owner, reducing kennel time and cost for local authorities. A rapid return also allows local authority officers to re-emphasise the importance of responsible dog ownership and therefore deterring further irresponsible abandonment of these pets. In addition, microchipping being traceable reduces the problem of puppy farming and lessening the incidence of infectious diseases and inherited defects. It also, importantly, provides a strong deterrent to dog theft. The effective operation of the microchipping system is dependent upon accurate records. Stray dogs that are microchipped and have up-to-date microchip records are more than twice as likely to be reunited with their keepers than dogs without a microchip. However, without properly maintained databases and proper enforcement, microchipping can never deliver everything that it's set out to do. In March of this year, the previous government published its response to the consultation carried out on the operation of cat and dog microchipping systems. The consultation ran from March to May 2022, and it garnered over 1,500 responses. The headline findings were that the overwhelming majority of respondents agreed we should introduce a single point of search portal to improve access to microchip records for approved users, that we should stop pets being registered on more than one database at a time, that the existing keeper should have an opportunity to object before the microchip record is transferred to a new keeper, and that the database operators must record whether a pet is missing or stolen. On making it easier for approved users to access the database records, the Government agreed to support the development of a single point of search portal, working further with database operators and key user groups. When it comes to the requirements of databases and maintaining the accuracy of records, the Government agreed that it would require database operators to send reminders to customers at least once a year to ensure that this information is up to date. In terms of the transfer of keepers' records, it said it would require database operators to have robust transfer of keepership processes in place and allow, where appropriate, the current registered keeper up to 28 days to object to the transfer. And crucially, on enforcement, it said it would require dog breeder information to remain as a permanently accessible part of the microchip record for enforcement purposes. Now, clearly, these commitments were made under the previous government, so I would welcome the Minister's comments on these issues today and update on whether actions as set out here will be taken forward. I would also be more than happy, as I'm sure others would, to work with him on making sure we get this system right and build on some of the important progress that's already been made. I'm also aware that the UK and Welsh governments are working closely together on this issue, particularly when considering future changes in relation to microchipping databases for both dogs and cats, including accessibility and a single point of entry. I would welcome any update the Minister could give on those discussions and way forward. Finally, as others have done, I want to pay tribute to the work of the RSPCA, the world's first and oldest animal welfare charity. I look forward to working alongside them and others and other animal welfare groups to raise the standards of dog welfare during the course of this Parliament and beyond. Thank you, Mr Twigg.
Adrian Ramsey.
Thank you, Mr Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve under you, and thank you to the Honourable Lady for securing this important debate. It's a pleasure to speak on this topic, as protecting and advocating for the voices of animals who can't speak for themselves is something that's hugely important to me, both personally and politically. Personally, because care for animals is one of the things I can remember back to my childhood as being one of the things I first cared about most. And I took the decision as a 15-year-old not to consume any animal products, and that's something that I've stuck with ever since. And as other members have referred to, I also have a rescue cat called Bella, and I think our relationships with our pets does often open our hearts to how we think about other species. And then politically, animal protection issues are one of the top issues that I hear about from my constituents in my inbox, as I'm sure is the case for other members. The British public really is a nation of animal lovers. And of course, animal protection is core to Green philosophy and to Green Party politics. So I want to join others in recognising the vital work that the RSPCA has done over the 200 years since its formation in a London cafe, the first and oldest animal welfare charity to be founded in the world. And as a nation of animal lovers, we know that the RSPCA has been keen to fostering that reputation, as well as to helping care for the hundreds of thousands of animals each year that are abandoned, neglected, tortured, harmed, or simply need rehoming. They've also been key when it comes to securing some of the strongest animal protection laws in the world, and I want to pay tribute to their remarkable achievements in this respect. It's no exaggeration to say that without the RSPCA, animals in this country today, and indeed worldwide, would be far less protected from cruelty. So thank you to everyone that's been part of the successful track record, from those early founders to the frontline inspectors and the protection officers who make a tangible difference on a daily basis, and those who successfully bring such a high number of prosecutions for breaking laws like the Animal Welfare Act. This work really matters, and I hope the government will continue to actively support it. Now, much has changed in the 200 years since the RSPCA was established, including the context in which they operate. Our understanding of the suffering that occurs when all types of animals are subject to testing has grown massively, for example, and I very much hope that the RSPCA and the government gets behind promoting modern and more effective cruelty-free methods of testing that don't involve animals. As our attitude as has our attitude towards animals. That's also changed. 61% of the British public, for example, have some discomfort about the way animals are treated on farms, on factory farms in particular, according to research this time last year from the Social Markets Foundation. Sadly, though, animal exploitation does continue to occur. From the treatment of the 15 Gentoo penguins at London Zoo, currently kept in an enclosure with no natural light or fresh air, and only 6 or 7 feet of water depth in which to dive. To the continued use of greyhounds in racing, where dogs face the constant risk of injury or death. And I'm incredibly proud that compassion towards animals has always been core to the Green Party, and that at our autumn conference recently, we became the first party to pledge a ban on greyhound racing, a position that the RSPCA supports, as does the majority of the public. And I'd invite the Minister to comment on the government's plans in this respect in terms of ending cruelty to animals in so-called sport. And animal abuse is sadly endemic in considerable parts of our food and farming system, including the proliferation of huge chicken sheds, some holding tens of thousands of chickens in incredibly cruel, unnatural conditions, and a big cause of the river pollution scandal. And in my area in East Anglia, in Norfolk and Suffolk, we're seeing a proliferation of these huge industrial sheds, including in Methwold, for example, where the World Wildlife Fund has highlighted that there are real climate impacts, environmental impacts, as well as animal welfare impacts of this, and has suggested that this project needs to be stopped due to the climate impact and the cumulative impact of the number of these projects taking place, including on nutrient pollution and water quality. So I'd challenge the government and invite the Minister specifically to comment on what will be done to address this proliferation of huge industrial chicken sheds with the huge impact it has on basic standards of animal welfare, as well as on environmental pollution and other issues for local communities. The RSPCA has sought to tackle the treatment of farmed animals specifically with the RSPCA Assured scheme, originally known as Freedom Food, when it was created 30 years ago. This seeks to hold certified producers to higher welfare standards than are required under UK law. However, as has been widely reported, Farm Assured has fallen short of its own high standards, with concerns that overcrowding, poor hygiene, and in some cases physical abuse of livestock by farm workers are in evidence on certain farms. And I therefore welcome the RSPCA's decision to conduct an internal review of the scheme. This is one that must be done to ensure that the RSPCA reputation is not used as a cover for such measures. And I note that the President and Vice President of the RSPCA, Chris Packham, and the former Green MP, Caroline Lucas, are closely monitoring the outcome of this RSPCA review. So, as we get to the 200-year anniversary of the RSPCA and warmly welcome and congratulate its many achievements, what I'd encourage the RSPCA to do and the government to consider is the ways in which we need to strengthen protection for animals going forward, whether that's in addressing the cruelty in the proliferation of these huge industrial chicken sheds and the impact that has on the environment and on animal protection, whether it's the smuggling of puppies and kittens, as other members have referred to, the need for stronger regulation on breeders to ensure high welfare standards for dogs and cats, and in particular to clamp down on the trend of breeding for extreme traits in dogs, which causes huge welfare conditions, including for breathing, for walking, and basic welfare standards. I'd like the Minister to respond on that specifically. I'd also call on the government to ban the manufacture and use of snares and to address the cruelty that can occur with use of animals in sport. For example, members may not be aware that there were 175 deaths of horses on racecourses in 2023, and the horse racing industry needs to show how it will stop deaths of horses on racetracks. So we've come so far, haven't we? We're a nation of animal lovers. We're proud of the work of the RSPCA to support particularly dogs and cats and animals that are our beloved pets. And yet there is so much more work to do, which I look forward to seeing the RSPCA being central to, and I'd very much welcome hearing from the Minister at the end of the debate on some of the specific animal abuse issues that I've highlighted that I know the British public wants to see addressed. Thank you, Chair.
Your Fairness.
Thank you, Mr Twigg. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairpersonship. I want to start by congratulating my honourable friend, the member for Newport West and Isherloin, I think I got that right, for securing today's debate and for her excellent speech. The RSPCA is not just the UK's largest animal welfare charities. It is one of our nation's most treasured and recognisable institutions. For a startling 200 years, it has been kept afloat thanks to the generous donations of the British public. This just goes to show that we truly are a nation of animal lovers and cherish the work that the RSPCA do to help them. Their work stretches across every part of the country, and I am so looking forward to visiting my local branch on Friday. It's a shame that the life of an MP is not more compatible with pet ownership, otherwise I would not be leaving there empty-handed. An armful of them, probably. Yeah. The RSPCA's workload is staggering. Last year, they averaged over 2,500 calls every single day, received over 20,000 abandonment calls and rehomed 27,000 animals. We appreciate all of that they do. It is heartbreaking to hear stories of pets being abandoned by their owners. Sadly, the cost of living crisis and the surge of so-called pandemic puppies has created a perfect storm whereby more and more people cannot afford to properly care for their beloved companions.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to intervene, but I wanted to just point out that it's counterintuitive, isn't it? In the cost of living crisis, one of the things that keeps people's mental health so fit and together can be the fact that they have a pet. And I know that my local centre, to which I referred earlier, it costs them £1,300 a day to run the place, but actually where they are able to match pets with people, then those people very often benefit enormously from improved mental health because of having the company of another animal. Yeah.
I thank the honourable member for bringing up that very pertinent point. And I think particularly through COVID, which was very stressful for everyone, you know, people's pets were their comfort and were also their form of exercise as well. In times when, you know, we are in distress, it's sort of proven that dogs will calm you down and make you have something to get up for in the morning and things like that. So thank you. As difficult as it can be, the RSPCA is always there if owners can no longer afford the cost of owning a pet. There is never an excuse for abandonment, but however the animals get to them, the RSPCA is there for every one of them. As an animal lover myself, and having adopted a dog, well, my father adopted a dog for me when I was a child, and having adopted a cat some years ago, particularly when I adopted the cat, I was really surprised at the thoroughness of vetting, if you like, of us, and most certainly we were interviewed. Someone came to my home and checked the garden, and were we on a busy road, and did, you know, sort of do the matching that the honourable member over there has spoken to before. And that is very comforting to know that the pets that sometimes have been abandoned are going to the right people in the right places who can look after them. Looking after a Chihuahua or a Great Dane is a very different thing, I would imagine, not having had either, but I would imagine there are different focuses and different housing abilities to do that. The ban on puppy and kitten smuggling is long overdue. The previous government dragged their feet on this for far too long, and animals have suffered as a result. I look forward to hearing from the Minister about his plans in the area. I also welcome our manifesto commitment to work towards the phasing out of animal testing. Animal testing has been vital for many of our most important scientific and medical discoveries, but technological advances mean we can look forward to an age where it is no longer needed. And I hope the Minister can today outline the way forward for us. I'm confident that the government's work in this area will extend beyond our manifesto commitments to ensure we remain world leaders when it comes to animal welfare. Given the RSPCA's expertise in this area, we must listen when they call for legislative changes. There is obviously issues that have been mentioned by my other colleagues about regulation, and I think the suggestion from my honourable friend from Isherloin, Newport and Isherloin, should be listened to, and I would be interested to see what the Minister says about establishing an animal health strategy, which I feel would have the support of Parliament should it proceed into the future. I again want to thank my honourable friend, the member for North West and Ishloin, and I've said it so many times now that I will be able to remember it, maybe, for giving us the opportunity to celebrate 200 years since the RSPCA was formed. This debate has been a great chance to reflect on how far we have come and discuss what more there is to do. And I look forward to seeing real progress in the years ahead. But most of all, I want to thank all those associated with the RSPCA, the donors, the workers, the board members, the fundraisers. I really want to congratulate them and wish them a very happy 200th birthday this year. Thank you.
Tim Farron.
Pleasure to serve under your guidance in the chair. A tremendous opportunity to, an honour to follow many great speeches, but most of all, my honourable friend, member for Newport East and Islwyn, something like that. So, Islwyn, thank you very much. The honourable member for Brightside and Hillsborough has done a masterclass in helping us to pronounce Newport West and Islwyn. But my honourable friend made a really, really great opening speech, and we're all to be very grateful to her for securing this debate. I think it's incredibly important that we mark the 200th anniversary, the first charity of its kind and still the leading one and still the largest charity, animal welfare charity in the United Kingdom. There's no two ways about it that how we treat animals, wildlife, livestock, pets, whatever form they take, is a mark of the kind of culture and society that we are. Are we a people who are kind? Are we a people who are considerate? Are we people who consider those who are more vulnerable than us, whether they be human or other animals? That is a measure of whether we truly are a civilised society. And we have to thank and praise the RSPCA for being one of the cornerstones of what it is to live in a civilised country today. From a local perspective, we have so much to be grateful for the RSPCA for. I represent 1,500 farms, the RSPCA inspectors helping our farmers and supporting animal welfare right across our huge and beautiful communities of Westmoreland and Lonsdale. Specifically, the annual Appleby Horse Fair, the RSPCA's focus upon that event and the towns and villages around Appleby, Kirkby, Stephen and other places around and about where there is great need for the RSPCA's intervention, and they do so, and we are very grateful to them. RSPCA Westmoreland, a wonderful branch. We praise the inspectors, all the volunteers, the people who make that outfit so very, very successful, from their base in Kendal to their shops in Bowness and in Kendal itself. They rely on donations. We've heard from many people in this debate today. 0.1% of all of the RSPCA's income comes from a government source. That leaves the rest of it raised by hard-working volunteers. And when you look at their funding, it is spent incredibly effectively. So 82 pence out of every pound that they raise goes on direct interventions to preserve animal welfare. 1 pence in every pound goes on governance. The other 17p goes invested in raising the next pound. And it's so important we remember that a really important part of what we do, what RSPCA do, is in raising money to be able to do the fantastic work that they do. The work of the RSPCA, I guess, is both practical and political. And it's important to reflect that and to praise them for both. So it's been a really great debate, and I won't cover everything that everybody's said because of time, but let's just start with my honourable friend for Newport East. Did she talk rightly about the issues to do with breeding regulations or the lack of them, and how the immense suffering that can be caused by animals because of specific bred characteristics? I had the pleasure, and indeed it was in many ways a very sobering experience, of visiting Battersea Dog and Cats Home last year, and I saw that tiny fraction of those animals, in particular a dog, who were lucky enough, so to speak, to be able to have medical intervention to undo the consequences, the issues that led to respiratory problems, great suffering and shorter lives. And it's a reminder to me why it's so important we look to regulate ownership as well as breeding. And when I were a lad, we had the dog licence. I'm not convinced it's not a good idea actually to go back to such a system where we often talk about dangerous breeds. Generally speaking, we're talking about poor owners. And we need to make sure that we have a licensing system that regulates that so that our animals are cared for and well reared. But she made wonderful points about the setting out those advances and reminded us that there have been many great things that this Parliament has done, both recently over a longer period of time, more recently on animal sentience, on for instance, the issues to do with preventing primates being kept as pets. Many of these things have happened, if not all of them, because of RSPCA pressure, and we are to be very grateful for that. Honourable friend, the member for Strangford, talked about a number of issues, but he talked specifically, again, how much the RSPCA does with so little. He also focused very rightly on the RSPCA's educational work, making sure that young people from a very early age know how important it is to value animals and to treat them with kindness. I think I'm the opposite of the honourable member for Strangford. I was the one brought up with cats. My wife was the one brought up with dogs, and she won. We had a wonderful couple of ginger toms when we were first married, called Eric and Ernie, who were terrorised by my toddler, who is now 23, and they moved next door and lived long and prosperous lives as a result. No need for RSPCA intervention then. That's the last cat, sadly, that I own. But moving on to the member for Clwyd East, who made a brilliant speech. So welcome to this place and to the the Westminster Hall family. She talked about, in particular, the importance of rescue centres and how many of them are full. The resources that are available are too few, and so many are tragically put down. Healthy and otherwise maybe happy animals. She talked about the importance of microchipping, and she also spoke about the importance of tackling puppy and kitten smuggling and farming, something which the last government shaped to do and didn't do. We had an animal welfare bill, which was in the 2019 Conservative Manifesto, which was very good, ready to go, and they took it to bits and did some of it. And that was a terrible waste, because there was absolutely a majority in this place in the last Parliament to pass that bill. So I hope this new government will now finish the job and indeed go further. But she made some excellent points alongside that as well. Honourable Member for Waveney Valley, which we were very pleased to hear his excellent and impassioned speech. He talked about the important, kind of the hard side of what the RSPCA do, the importance of bringing prosecutions. Then there must be justice. When people treat animals unfairly and cruelly, we should do more than just wring our hands, and we are to be very grateful to the RSPCA, its inspectors and officers, for making sure that justice is done and prosecutions happen. I'm happy to give way. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to point out, I think that there's quite a lot of research that shows that people who have been violent to others very often, I don't want to say started, but there are indicators that show that cruelty to animals is a precursor very often to cruelty to people. And I think the RSPCA has a good place in its work to actually identify people who are capable of doing the most dreadful things to animals, who might then go on to offend against other people if those haven't happened in reverse.
I mean, tragically, my honourable friend for Wells and Mendip Hills is absolutely correct in what she says, and there's so much evidence out there to back that up, sadly, that many people who abuse human beings started off, shall we say, learnt their trade with how they treated animals, and that is shocking. And it's important that the RSPCA, in dealing with, as the Honourable Member for Waveney rightly pointed out, dealing with the prosecutions, in many ways perhaps we end up protecting human beings in the long run by tackling those who abuse animals. He also spoke very importantly about the impact of animal welfare issues on pollution, and in particular the huge industrial style chicken sheds and what that means for water quality, and also about the importance of welfare of farmed animals, which I'll come back to if I have a minute in my conclusion. The Honourable Member for Sheffield Brightside and Hillsborough spoke about many things, including the RSPCA's commitment to rehoming and ensuring good homes for those who've been abandoned, and we need to support them to do that, because of course in so many cases, as the Honourable Member for Clwyd East said, that there just aren't enough of these animals being rehomed. own because of the lack of space in the in shelters. And then in an earlier intervention, my honourable friend, Member for Wells and Mendip Hills, talked about the clear and attested benefits for our mental health from pet ownership. There's no two ways about it. So I now, having lost to my wife, we have dogs. We have a chocolate lab called Ted, who is my running companion. I have a running lead. He pulls me up the hills. Awesome. We also have an elderly and decrepit Springer Spaniel, Jasper, who used to be my running companion, and he improves my mental health by reminding me that I'm not the most decrepit member of our household. But bless him. But you put him in water, you'd think he was a seal. Yeah, go on.
I'd like to just offer some balance as well, because it comes to me that actually the RSPCA was involved in an amazing project working with young offenders on the South Coast, where actually young people who had very often ended up in effectively the prison system, who had really never been loved or had anything to love, had actually had the opportunity to work with horses, big, powerful animals who can hurt them much more than anyone can. They can hurt them. But it was an amazing project which allowed the recovery of young people. So I just want to give that bit of balance to my previous
and
point.
she makes a really, very good point there as well. I think that's absolutely true. So animals are good for us, so we should be good to them. And the RSPCA have been great at being able to encourage both sides of that. So, in conclusion, let's just look at, we said earlier on, and I think it's right to say, and pay tribute to the RSPCA for their practical work and for their political work, lobbying to make this place kinder to animals and our society kinder to animals. So they have a list of ambitions, and we've gone through many of them, but just to list a handful of them: to stop illegal puppy and kitten trading, to improve farmed animal welfare, to end the severe suffering of animals used in science, to secure legal protection for animals, establishing an Animal Protection Commission, and to achieve statutory powers in England and Wales for RSPCA inspectors, and indeed more internationally, to secure a UN declaration for animals. And the things that we should be doing in this place to go further and to meet the high standards the RSPCA set us is indeed to do things like banning puppy and kitten smuggling and farming, to end the use of inhumane cages, particularly when it comes to laying hens on an industrial scale, to move away where it's safe to do so from animal testing for medical and other forms of science. But then there's broader things as well. I mean, in the last Parliament, we had a government that did trade deals with countries with poor animal welfare standards than our own, and therefore effectively exporting problems to other countries and undermining our farmers who have relatively very high animal welfare standards in the process. They rewarded those producers overseas with poorer welfare standards than ours and penalised our farmers with higher welfare standards. That was wrong. I hope this government will do something about it. We also, the thing I will praise about the last government, that for all sorts of other problems there are with the new farm payment scheme, farming in protected landscapes, or FIPL for short, which is is available for grant support for farmers in places like the lakes and the dales and other protected landscapes, that allows farmers to move towards accommodation and other capital kit that allows them to keep their animals at a higher welfare standard. That money runs out at the end of March. I'd love the Minister to address that. FIPL has been one of the few good things so far to come out of the botched transition from the old farm payment scheme to the new one, and it's good for animal welfare and it's good for farmers. And more generally, let us remember that one of the reasons why we have higher animal welfare standards in farming in this country than in other places like Australia and the US is because we have the tradition of family farming, therefore close husbandry. Put bluntly, if you're an Australian or an American farmer, the first time you know your livestock is unwell is when you find its sun-bleached bones the next year. The reality is in the United Kingdom, we have a closeness and therefore a tenderness and a practical way of being able to care for our animals. So what can we do to make sure in the farm transition we don't do what is currently happening and see huge landlords being the ones who benefit, thanks to the mistakes of the last government, and instead make sure that smaller farmers who are currently not able to get into those schemes. I spoke yesterday in the debate of a hill farmer I spoke to recently who's lost 40,000 in farm payments. He's gained 14 in sustainable farming centre to replace it. Even that cost him $6,000 to get into, to try to get the land agent to get him through the hoops. But what that means is, for people like him, potentially go out of business, and we'll end up with ranch farming in the UK rather than the family farming we need if we really care about animal welfare in farming. So in short, 200 years is absolutely something we should celebrate. They lack resources, the RSPCA. We need to support them to have more. There are so many laws that do not support animal welfare in the way we'd want them to, and that includes with government policy that advantages those that mistreat those animals both home and abroad. The RSPCA has done so much, wants to do so much more, and it's our job as a Parliament to support them. Thank you.
Opposition from bench, Robbie Moore.
Thank you, Mr Twiggin. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I congratulate the Honourable Member for Newport West and Ishloin for securing this really important debate. I know, having interacted with the member many a times in the previous parliamentary session when she was holding the role as a shadow minister in DEFRA, just how much she cares deeply about animal welfare issues. And it's good to see that she is championing those issues by securing this important debate. And what better way than doing it for the RSPCA in their 200th anniversary year. And it is in thanks to part of the hard work of bodies like the RSPCA, covering enforcement, education and campaigning, that the UK sits as the highest G7 nation on the World Animal Protection Index. And can I welcome Chris Sherwood from the RSPCA as the Chief Executive in the public gallery alongside his team. The RSPCA's work is truly staggering in scale and spans over 2 centuries of dedication. In 2023 alone, the RSPCA responded to over 110,000 instances and provided over 500,000 hours of care to animals needing treatment or rehabilitation. We mustn't forget that every 32 seconds, the RSPCA received a call on their cruelty and advice line, and nearly 10,000 people offered their time as volunteers to the RSPCA, which is truly commendable. This is a monumental effort, which means thousands of wild animals, pets and livestock have received care and protection from cruelty. And vitally, the RSPCA have also conducted much work with animal owners to deliver important advice on how best to care for their animals. Now, I agree with all members that have made the positive comments about the RSPCA in today's debate, because the RSPCA is a real success story in how people across the country can come together to make a difference about something that they really care deeply about. It is fantastic that we live in a country in which people are empowered to make a difference and feel free to act on their convictions without relying solely on state inspectorates. And as has been highlighted through this debate, the RSPCA received almost no government funding, operating through charitable donations and their internal fundraising operations. The RSPCA plays a vital role in the enforcement of our animal welfare laws. Through private prosecutions, every one of us has the right to bring forward a prosecution where we feel a crime has been committed, and the RSPCA regularly does this through a sponsoring individual. And I hope that the government will continue to support private prosecutions, as they are a vital part of our legal system, ensuring the law is owned and accessible to us all and not just the state. Of course, the RSPCA carries out this work under the law, carries out this aspect of work under the law, and I would like to take a moment to highlight some of the work under the previous government did to strengthen the legal protections for animals. Since leaving the European Union, we have had greater freedom to determine our own animal welfare law, including passing the Animal Sentience Act, a landmark piece of legislation which provided much more power. And the Act also created the Animal Sentience Committee, providing expert advice to government on animal welfare reforms. The Animal Welfare Livestock Exports Act also delivered on commitments from the previous government to ban the export of live animals, ending the unnecessary stress, exhaustion and injury caused by their export. A piece of legislation which I know has already been commented by other members in this debate as being a good piece of legislation that was introduced. And in 2016 and 2023, under the Conservative administration, we made changes to the law requiring dogs and cats, respectively, to be microchipped in England, ensuring that they can be reunited with their owners. And it was good to hear the comments and welcome to Westminster Hall, the member for Clwyd East, on the comments that she was making specifically around microchipping. And in 2019, wild animals were banned in circuses, and in 2021, the Animal Welfare Sentencing Act increased the maximum possible sentence for animal cruelty from 6 months to 5 years. And I would like to pick up on the points that was made from the Honourable Member for Strangford around the work that the previous administration was doing collectively with our devolved nations. And I would hope that the Minister, as I'm sure he will do in his role, to continue the dialogue with all devolved nations to ensure that we can work at pace on improving animal welfare legislation. And I also urge the Government to continue at pace the key areas of work that we were doing in terms of livestock worrying. In particular, we need to ensure that the toughening of regulations surrounding livestock worrying through the implementation of the Dogs Protection of Livestock Amendment Act will continue to receive support from the Government. Time and time again, we hear too often that farmers are seeing their own livestock being killed or seriously savaged or seriously injured as a result of people taking their dogs across fields, and this needs to stop. So I hope that the Government will introduce this piece of legislation and it can become law. And I would like to seek confirmation from the Minister that that will be the case. It is only right that those who are responsible with their pet, when privileged to pass across someone else's land, feel the full consequences of their actions. And I would like to, at this moment in time, thank the Civil Service team for their assistance, not only to me, but previous ministers in the work that they were doing on the pieces of legislation that we were introducing when we were in administration. Another area I know that the RSPCA have been campaigning on for some time is the distress caused to animals by the irresponsible use of fireworks. This is an issue particularly relevant in my own constituency of Keighley and Ilkley, where fireworks are regularly set off throughout the year, late into the evening, sometimes in all hours of the night. This causes huge distress to pets and other animals, not to mention their owners struggling to sleep. And I would therefore take the opportunity to ask the Minister what work the Government plans to undertake to enforce our existing firework law, but also whether the Minister believes that this is it is necessary to toughen up existing legislation in this area. As all members have highlighted through their contributions today, we are a nation of animal lovers, and what better way to celebrate that by holding today's debate, celebrating the work of the RSPCA over the last 200 years. And again, I would like to champion the work that my honourable friend from Newport West has been doing on raising the matters of animal welfare, and I hope that she'll continue to champion that from the government side of the benches. And I hope that with continued cross-party support, the RSPCA will continue to deliver the fantastic care it already does for animals all across the country.
Minister.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to serve with you in the chair, Mr Twigg. And can I join in the congratulations to my honourable friend, and she's indeed a very good friend, the member for Newport West and Ishlin, on securing this important debate. I thought her opening speech setting out the history and the issues was very thorough and absolutely typical of her deep knowledge of these subjects, which she displayed, of course, when she served with me as a member of the shadow team over many, many years. And I'm delighted that she's continuing to be a staunch advocate for animal welfare in this place. And delighted that her commitment to this cause was recognised last month when I'm told she won the Nature 2030 Award for Animal Welfare. And can I also thank the Shadow Minister for his kind words for my colleague. They're very well received. Could I also pay tribute to the RSPCA's outgoing Chief Executive, Chris Sherwood, and wish him well in his new role, which I'm told is at the NSPCC. So I'm delighted to take part in today's debate and reply, celebrating the RSPCA's 200th anniversary and some of the achievements since that first meeting in the London coffee shop in 1824. And it's been a very good debate, in my view. I was warned in advance that we'd probably get a number of people's pets mentioned, So we've had Bella from Waveney Valley, we've had Ted from Westmoreland and Lonsdale. I'm not going to add my own, but these debates, and I'd welcome those who are new members to the happy band that joins these Westminster Hall debates on a regular basis. I suspect we're all going to get to know each other even better over the next few years. And we've had, of course, no debate like this would be incomplete without a contribution from the Honourable Member for Strangford, and I'll come to some of his comments in a minute. But I was particularly pleased to welcome the member for Clwyd East. She made very important points about the microchipping consultation, and I can tell her that the points she's making are under very, very serious consideration. The points around the databases are very well made, but inevitably complex. And I was pleased to see the member for Waveney Valley here. He raised a series of important points. Clearly, there are issues around greyhound racing and welfare. I have to tell him that those involved in that sport are making considerable efforts to address those issues, but we monitor it carefully, and we will make sure that if action is needed, that it will be proportionate and sensible. And he also raised important points around poultry production. Of course, we want to improve in every way we can animal welfare. I'll just gently say to him that the trade issues are complicated, and there is no point in us moving unless we can move in tandem with others. Exporting cruelty doesn't solve the problem, but it's a complicated set of issues, but we clearly want to make as many improvements as we can. And I was pleased to hear from my honourable friend also from Sheffield Brightside and Hillsborough and her important points on animal testing, and I'll come to those in a moment. But returning to the RSPCA, as we always say, as a nation of animal lovers, the RSPCA plays a crucial role and absolutely should take significant credit for helping to shape the attitudes towards animal welfare that underpin our society. And I was very interested to hear the comments from the Honourable Member for Strangford about the UPCA, and welcome his comments, which informed my thinking, so I'm not sure I was entirely aware of the work that they do. But their inspectors and the RSPCA's inspectors and the animal rescue officers who work in often extremely challenging circumstances to investigate and rescue animals from harm deserve all our thanks and praise, as do the efforts of staff and volunteers who work so tirelessly to rehabilitate and rehome so many animals to give them a better life. And the RSPCA has proved itself to be a formidable champion for animal welfare over the past 200 years, and successive governments have greatly benefited from their expertise and advice. Now, a number of campaigns and issues have been raised, and I'll try and set out our position on some of the main ones, starting with kitten and puppy smuggling. Now, we outlined in our manifesto that we're committed to ending puppy smuggling. Since the pet travel rules were harmonised with the European Union in 2012, there's been a significant increase in the number of non-commercial pet movements into the UK. Sadly, they've tripled since 2011 to over 320,000 dogs and cats in 2023. And the number of dogs, cats and ferrets imported under the commercial rules has also significantly increased over the last few years. And I listened again closely to the Honourable Member for Strangford's comments on cat movements as well. Now, by its very nature, we can't know the true extent of pet smuggling operations, but we know that commercial imports of dogs and cats are being disguised as non-commercial movements, as these are subject to less stringent checks. Sadly, there's also an emerging market for the importation of heavily pregnant dogs and dogs with cropped ears, and this is a painful practice which has rightly been banned in the UK for over 15 years, and we intend to clamp down on those unscrupulous traders who prioritise profit over welfare. It's also linked to some of the dog breeding issues, and we're working closely with the UK Bracephalic Working Group to reduce the number of dogs that are affected by that condition. Moving on to wildlife, my honourable friend, the member for Newport West and Ithlin, mentioned the overriding recommendation of the 2015 Law Commission report into wildlife legislation, namely that wildlife laws in this country need to be consolidated. Now, I can't today make any commitments to bring about that consolidation, but it's clear there needs to be more consistency and clarity. And as outlined in our general election manifesto, this includes an explicit commitment to bring an end to the use of snare traps, which I'm sure honourable members will welcome. But I'm conscious there are other wildlife traps for which questions are also posed as to their humaneness. And the law should be there to improve the protection of our wild animals, not only from an ethical standpoint, but because protection for wildlife is a crucial part of our approach for meeting our nature recovery ambitions. I'm happy to give one.
Big up to the Minister for his speech, and it's wonderful to see him in his place. I spent 5 years before my election to this House working in the office of the Member for Newport West and Isloin and the Shadow Deputy team with the Minister, so it's very good to be here listening to him. But can I urge him on that point to be bold and ambitious? Listening to the Shadow Minister earlier on, it was like a rehash of a previous life, and it wasn't quite the rose-tinted version from my recollection anyway. So as we approach these points, as we seek to have the strongest approach to animal welfare, be bold and let's do what they didn't.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his intervention, and I will always listen to his exhortations to be bold and watch this space in the coming few months, I would say. Finally, on wildlife, while significant sanctions are available to judges to hand down to those convicted of most wildlife crimes, I know there are questions as to why there are different penalties for similarly abhorrent acts against different species, and bringing more consistency on this point seems worthy of closer consideration, and the government will look at how best to deliver nature restoration and enforce animal welfare standards for its wildlife. Now, moving to the points particularly raised by the Honourable Member for Sheffield, Brightside and Hillsborough around phasing out animals used in experiments. The use of animals in science, highly sensitive issue, and where we agree with the RSPCA that replacing the use of animals with humane alternatives is absolutely essential. That's why we made in our manifesto a commitment to partner with scientists, industry and civil society as we work towards the phasing out of animal testing. And we're currently engaging with key stakeholders with an interest in animal research as to how we will take this commitment forward. And I did notice in my honourable friend from Newport and Islin's opening statement, she asked for a timetable, and I can assure her it will be done in due course. The UK is world leading in the development of alternative methods to using animals, and this government is keen to ensure that they are utilised wherever possible. However, technology is not quite yet at the stage whereby animal testing can wholly be replaced. We want to replace the use of animals in scientific procedures where we can, but for now the carefully regulated use of animals in scientific research remains necessary if we're to protect humans and the wider environment. The use of animals in such testing is limited to specific purposes. Furthermore, the use of animals in scientific procedures is only permitted if there is no alternative available. Where the number of animals used is the minimum needed to achieve the scientific benefit, and where the potential harm to animals is limited to the absolute minimum needed to achieve the scientific benefit. These are collectively known as the 3 R's of replacement, reduction and refinement. Now, I also recognise the significant public interest in the welfare of farmed animals and the immense contribution that the RSPCA has made to help raise farm animal welfare standards through its lobbying and through its farm assurance scheme, RSPCA Assured. And I hear the comments made by the Honourable Member for Waveney, but I'm confident that the work the RSPCA is doing on this will restore confidence in that very, very important scheme. Now, I appreciate the strong public demand for clearer animal welfare information on the food they buy to help them make purchasing decisions that align with their values. And a public consultation on fairer food labelling was undertaken earlier this year by the previous government. That consultation sought views on proposals to extend existing mandatory methods of production labelling. Now, we're currently carefully considering all the responses to the consultation before deciding on next steps, and we will be publishing a response to this consultation in due course. Turning to the issue of cages and confinement, I'm very much aware of the strong public feeling on keeping farm animals in cages, and the recent campaigns, including by the RSPCA, urging the government to publish consultations on phasing out the use of enriched colony cages for laying hens and farrowing crates for pigs. Appreciate the RSPCA's role in leading the way on encouraging high standards when it comes to this issue, with RSPCA Assured not permitting the use of colony cages for laying hens or farrowing crates for pigs. Now, I'm encouraged that the market itself is driving the move to alternative systems for laying hens, primarily free-range and barn, and away from the use of cages. This transition to non-cage egg production has also been supported by the major supermarkets, who have pledged to stop selling shell eggs from hens kept in colony cages by 2025. This shift by retailers has accelerated the move away from colony cage systems. Free-range eggs account for over 60% of the total egg throughput in the UK. But we're not just going to leave this to market forces. The transition to cage-free systems is being supported through grants for laying hens and pullet farmers in England with flocks of 1,000 birds or more to refurbish or replace existing housing, including those looking to make the transition from colony cages to high welfare non-cage systems. As with cages for laying hens, the issue of ending the use of pig farrowing crates is one that not only affects the UK industry, but is also something that our European trading partners are also considering. Very happy to.
Jim Shannon.
Minister, I know that you and I, and hopefully everyone else in this chamber, appreciates the efforts and the contributions by farmers. Farmers, by and large, want their animals to be well looked after, and they try to achieve that. The National Farmers Union here, the Ulster Farmers Union back home, are working alongside farmers to improve things. Sometimes in debates you can get a wee bit lost in these things. It's important to remind that many people are trying their best to make things better.
I absolutely agree with the honourable member, and it's important to make that point that, of course, all our farmers want to raise their animals to the highest possible standards, but they need the right regulatory frameworks to make that possible, and that's what we're working on. And because, as with any change to our farming systems, as I said earlier, we need to consider the implications for trade. We already lead in Europe. I will.
Thank you very much. And, I appreciate the Minister setting out that he wants to be ambitious on animal protection and has asked us to watch this space, which we will do in terms of the cross-party interest there is in this room on animal protection issues. But in his reference to market forces and market trends in terms of animal welfare, could I just highlight that we are seeing a proliferation of huge industrial chicken sheds, including in Norfolk and Suffolk, but I'm sure around the country. Tens of thousands of birds, and in some cases it's pigs, in really unpleasant, cramped, indoor conditions that are not consistent with the sorts of welfare standards that the Minister's talking about. So what action will be taken now by the government to stop this trend, which is about animal protection and about river pollution and environmental standards?
Well, I would just actually rather disagree with him here in the sense that this assumption that larger scale production facilities, the animal welfare standards are lower. I think that is a false premise, and I would urge him to look at some of the smaller premises sometimes which are undercapitalised and I'm afraid do not always achieve the welfare standards that we're looking for. I don't think it's as simple as he makes out. And the trade issues are really important because we already lead in Europe, going back to the pig sector here, in having a significant outdoor pig sector. 40% of the national sow breeding herd farrow freely on outdoor units with no option for confinement, and DEFRA's statutory welfare code of practice for pigs states that the aim is for farrowing crates to no longer be necessary and for any new system to protect the welfare of the sow as well as her piglets. In the meantime, under the new Get Funding to Improve Animal Health and Welfare service, a fully funded vet visit known as the Animal Health and Welfare Review is available to pig farmers to improve pig health and welfare. So I think it's fair to say the United Kingdom is rightly proud of the high animal welfare standards that underpin our high-quality British produce, and we will work to ensure we address low confidence and provide stability for the farming sector. So in conclusion, Mr Twigg, this government is looking forward to delivering the most ambitious programme for animal welfare in a generation. I very much hope we can build upon the excellent relationship we've forged with the RSPCA over many years to progress the various important animal welfare issues that have been raised today.
Ruth Jones to wind up.
Thank you, Mr Twigg, and I do want to thank every honourable member who's taken part in this debate today. The members for Strangford, for Clwyd East, for Waveney Valley, good to welcome him to his place, Sheffield Brightside and Hillsborough, Westmoreland and Lonsdale, of course, and the Shadow Minister and the Minister. Everybody, I think, has made intelligent, reasonable and well-informed contributions to this debate today. And so many valid and important points have been made. There is no doubt that animal welfare would not be where it is today without the immense contribution of the RSPCA over the last 2 centuries. And today we know that the animal rescue line from the RSPCA receives around 1 million calls a year, or 1 every 6 seconds. And staff work across England and Wales to investigate allegations of animal cruelty and neglect. And I was recently lucky enough to be able to visit the RSPCA Centre in Newport East, in my neighbouring constituency, and I accompanied an RSPCA inspector on her rounds for the day. And I would urge all members to go out with an RSPCA inspector. It really opens your eyes to what they're really having to deal with. And I saw firsthand the vital work that they do there, but the RSPCA staff, supporters and volunteers continue to work tirelessly for a better world for every kind of animal. And in line with the Shadow Minister, I would like to also finish by paying tribute to the RSPCA Chief Exec, Chris Sherwood, who is leaving the RSPCA, which I know they will be missing him, because he's led them since 2018. And I want to thank him and all the other staff for their hard work. And today we celebrate the RSPCA, which is a well-loved organisation whose work ensures that animal welfare is at the forefront of our agenda. So thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the government support for the RSPCA. As many of that opinion say aye, of the contrary no, I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order. Order. I would call Sir Ashley Fox to move the motion, and then I would call the Minister to respond. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as the convention is, as this is a 30-minute debate. I do know at least one other member has indicated they wish to speak, and there may be interventions. Sir Ashley Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to move that this House has considered the environmental impact of the proposed salt marshes at Ballot, Hams and other sites. It's an honour to serve with you in the chair, Mr. Twigg, and I'd also like to welcome the Minister to her place. I'm grateful to have this opportunity to move this motion, which is of great importance to my constituents in Bridgwater. I asked for this debate to discuss EDF's plans to establish a salt marsh at Ballot, Hams in Somerset. This proposal was highly unpopular with the local community. In fact, it was difficult to find anyone who thought it was a good idea. When I met with EDF, even they seemed a little half-hearted about it. But why, you might ask, does EDF, who are building the Hinkley Point C nuclear power station a few miles down the coast, want to flood 800 acres of beautiful Somerset countryside and turn it into a salt marsh? The answer is complex. When EDF were given planning permission to build Hinkley Point C, they were required to take measures to mitigate damage to marine life caused by the water intake pipes. These are situated in the Bristol Channel and, as you might imagine, there is a risk of harm to fish that might get sucked into those pipes. EDF originally set out 3 proposals to minimise the risk of harm to marine life. Firstly, by designing special low-velocity, side-entry water intake pipes with a capped head design. This reduces the number of fish that are sucked into the pipe as they swim past the end. Secondly, a fish recovery and return system. This means that a good proportion of the fish who swim into the intake pipe get returned to the sea with minimal injury. Not a perfect system, but certainly one that will save the more resilient species. And thirdly, they were required to install an acoustic fish deterrent, or AFD. This involves the installation of a number of sound projectors placed underwater. These would play a constant loud noise designed to stop fish from approaching the area of the intake pipes. EDF now says it is unable to install the AFD because of engineering difficulties and health and safety risks to divers who would need to maintain the system. In order to deviate from their AFD proposals, EDF are having to submit a material change application. As part of that application, they are working with the Environment Agency to agree several compensatory habitat measures in order to deliver benefit to the estuary's qualifying habitat. Now, EDF say they are putting forward a mosaic of mitigation measures. Some of these seem sensible and beneficial to the natural ecosystem in and around the Severn estuary. For example, the creation of several hectares of seagrass in the estuary and a commitment to delivering 15 hectares of kelp forest. They are also considering upgrades to several weirs to benefit migratory fish. The most significant proposal, though, and the one that brings us to Westminster Hall today, is the creation of 800 acres of salt marsh. There was, at the beginning of this year, a consultation by EDF on this salt marsh being established in Ballot, Hams in my constituency. Ballot, Hams is a precious ecosystem. EDF's plans to flood this area with salt water would endanger not just the land itself, but the myriad of species that call it home. It would transform the biodiverse habitat into barren, species-poor salt marshes and tidal mud. What is most extraordinary about EDF's plans is that the Hams is an area of great ecological importance. It forms part of the Bridgwater Bay site of special scientific interest, which was first declared in 1989. This recognises the area as one of particular interest to science due to the rare species of flora and fauna it contains. There is a lush, biodiverse habitat with many animals in the Hams. This includes lapwings, redshanks, otters, water voles, water beetles, great crested newts and yellow wagtails. These species would be driven out if the area was turned into a salt marsh. The hams provide valuable grazing for local farmers, which would also be lost. In my view, EDF's plan was a disaster. And even if it went ahead, it was not clear how it would mitigate for the fish lost. And I made my views abundantly clear to EDF over the months. So I was delighted when, a day after making this request for debate, EDF announced they are pausing their proposal. EDF say they are now considering 4 other potential sites for salt marshes in the Severn Estuary at Kingston Seymour, Littleton, Arlingham and Rodley. Yes, happy to give way.
Thank you very much, Minister, and thank you for all your detail there. The excellent sort of summary of exactly what they're proposing also in Arlingham. This was put to the people of Arlingham, and they had a large meeting on Monday evening, and almost universally there was a feeling that this wasn't a good idea for people of Arlingham, or indeed for their landscape, and many of the reasons that you have put across are the same in Arlingham. It does seem rather strange to me that as mitigation for this what they're predicting is about 182 million fish that may be lost, that the Arlingham site and salt marsh is somehow going to compensate for that. And I don't think there's any way that we can say that these two match each other. Yes, certainly. So what I would say is, while I support the principle of habitat creation and acknowledge the benefits of the salt marsh, does the Minister share my concern that EDF's application to modify Hinkley Point C consent order seems like an unacceptably high price for an environmentally unique habitat to pay? Thank you.
Well, I'll leave the Minister to answer those points, if I may. Yes, would I give way?
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for giving way. I would like to pay tribute, and I'm sure the member will too, to the amazing community at Ballot Hams, who campaigned ferociously in a quite a gentle way, but very, very single-mindedly to get their aims across and their dislike across. And I hope that, as is reflected in the other gentleman's comments about the community, and indeed the communities that we have a meeting on Monday next week, but it is actually the matter that the communities feel that perhaps EDF and the Environment Agency may have been a little heavy-handed in their first approaches, in that they seem to be rather fierce and not accepting of the fact that people have a view about their own community and the sustainability of it.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention, and she anticipates the next part of my speech, which is to say that, as a new MP, it is tempting to believe that this change of heart by EDF is entirely due to my persuasive powers. But that is not the case. All credit must go to the Ballot Hams Action Group, a genuine grassroots campaign that sprang up to defend the hams. The group demonstrated the significance of the hams by conducting wildlife surveys and collecting personal and historical testimonies. They also raised awareness of the issue through petitions, social media, community events such as the photography competition, and collaboration with local schools. I want to pay tribute to the group's coordinator, Judith Ballard, and to other leading members, Moira Allen, Rachel and Molly Fitton, and Joy Russell. There are many others who worked hard to save the hams, that it might be enjoyed for generations to come. I thank them all. Perhaps they can help my honourable friends in resisting unwanted salt marshes. Now, while my constituents and I welcome EDF's decision not to proceed with this plan, there are several outstanding questions that need answering. My first question relates to the inclusion and now the planned removal of the AFD in the Development Consent Order. This was included at the request of the Environment Agency. I want to know why it was included if, as we are now told, it is unsuitable for the conditions in the Bristol Channel. And related to that question, what was the process between the Environment Agency and EDF on agreeing that it should be removed? The process to my local community looks opaque. Some of my constituents believe that the AFD should remain as a condition of EDF being allowed to operate Hinkley Point C. Now, I don't claim to have the technical knowledge to know whether it is a practical option or not, and the Secretary of State has yet to make a formal decision. But it seems to me that EDF and the Environment Agency are putting together a package of mitigation measures in the hope that this deal will be signed off. I want to know why, once the decision to explore the establishment of a salt marsh was made, Paulet Hams was designated as the preferred site. As I said earlier, the Hams is recognised as a wetland of international importance. Turning it into a salt marsh isn't a mitigation. It would be an intentional decision to cause environmental harm. It is a completely illogical choice and an extraordinary one by the Environment Agency. The view of many of my constituents is that the Environment Agency chose Paulet Hams so they could flood the land and save money on maintaining flood defences. So I want to ask the Minister for an assurance that the government will continue to maintain all the flood defences on the River Parrett. Finally, I want to ask the government to consider whether there might be a better way of delivering environmental improvements than through the Environment Agency. It was the Environment Agency that wanted to include an AFD in the initial development consent order. Now they apparently agree it should be removed. It is they who are the prime movers behind this unwanted salt marsh, and having retreated from Paulet Hams, now wish to inflict this on other parts of the countryside. If an acoustic fish deterrent is truly impractical, and I remain to be convinced, then I would like to see the money saved, which will be tens of millions of pounds, put at the disposal of the local community to fund genuine environmental improvements. And I want to see those decisions taken by democratically accountable bodies, such as Somerset Council and the local town and parish councils. In my view, they are more likely to spend the money wisely than the agency that thought that turning Paulet Hams into a salt marsh was a good idea. Thank you.
This House has considered the environmental impact of the proposed salt marshes at Paulet Hams and other sites. Tessa Mons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I recognise I have very little time in which, because I wish to make sure that the Minister has an opportunity to respond to some of the questions that both the member for Bridgewater and I will raise. I recognise I've already mentioned the fact that it was a very heavy-handed approach. That's how the constituents that I represent feel, and that there's very little detail, and this has caused enormous distress in my community in Kingston Seymour. I recognise also that, and I thank the Honourable Member for actually talking about those campaigners, many of whom I know myself. And I would recognise the efforts also of Claire Sully, who was one of his opponents in the general election. But in an effort to balance, I think I should also recognise that back in 2011, when this came to Kingston Seymour once before from the Environment Agency, Liam Fox was somebody who helped to see this off in a previous iteration. So there are a number of things I just want to mention very briefly, and that is to say that there is some expert evidence which was offered in 2011 from Dr. Rob Kirby, who's a coastal geomorphologist and a scientist, and he advised that any salt marsh would eventually wash away or be eroded. I've already mentioned to the Minister earlier today that actually this piece of coast is on the Severn Bore, that the rise and fall of the tide, and this will affect on every one of those communities that is now impacted or potentially impacted. There's the second highest tidal rise in the world, and therefore it seemed highly likely. I've been informed by local historians that actually the seawall that exists already is of Roman origin in places, and I cannot understand exactly what the Environment Agency intends. If it intends to breach the seawall, then that will increase the level of flooding. If it's intending to build up the seawall, then it's not going to create any more salt marsh. So I'm really very unsure of how this is. I think I will pick up exactly on the Honourable Member's point about why it is that we were all told that this acoustic fish deterrent thing was going to be absolutely the answer to all problems back, a wee while ago, many years ago actually, and now it appears to be utter fiction, and I don't understand how it is that we can suddenly be looking at creating salt marsh and dismissing the number of fish that were going to be killed when that was a critical factor when Hinkley Point C was being discussed, and everyone was raising their hands in horror at the fact that there was going to be massive destruction of fish, but the acoustic fish deterrent was going to get rid of that problem. The area that we're talking about, Kingston Seymour, there are concerns from the residents, and I have to say there are people, there's not 100% of the population that is against this, but people need the detail. So I would say that there was a meeting and a number of constituents have raised with me the following points. They're really concerned about solar farms, about the sewage works that are in this area, and the adverse impacts of saltwater on the 3 freshwater fishing lakes that are in Kingston Seymour. They are very concerned also about, as I said, the increased risk of flooding, and they already experienced increased insurance costs for their properties and businesses in 2011 as a result of the Environment Agency's proposals then. It's also the fact that there is a coastal footpath, and it's brilliant. It's an opportunity for people to move back and forth along the coast. And I myself, shortly after being elected on this occasion, went to the opening of the peer-to-peer coastal path, which is a multi-user path, and it connects Weston-super-Mare Pier with Clevedon Pier. And it's massively well used. Even before it was opened, a week after the election, it had been incredibly popular in that first week, and the numbers of people using it were absolutely huge. So I think the other thing that the Minister might